Carlos Icy with ESPN LA alongside the one and only Dr. Alan Byer. I can easily say that MLB is having a crisis here, and I want to get your thoughts on this. A headline for a story that came out from the Associated Press yesterday. MLB says pitcher injuries more likely to occur early in season. I want to get your reaction to that headline, Dr. B.
Well, we've kind of discussed a little bit of this before, talking about Tommy John surgeries and spring training being guys getting back into shape from after a couple of months off. And I think we even talked about allowing a pitcher to go the full distance and pitch a no-hitter the first week of the season, which the Astros did about a month and a half ago. Subsequently, that same pitcher got suspended for having a sticky substance on his glove. But I'm against that. I think that Major League Baseball players need a couple of months to really get into the grind and for pitchers to really start throwing 90 or 100 pitches a game. Just because a guy's 25 years old, as opposed to teenagers or little leaguers who we count pitches very religiously to protect their elbows and their shoulders, we kind of don't really do that in the pros. And I think maybe we need to start doing that more at the major league and minor league levels. It's just as much force on the elbow of a 25-year-old as it is a 16-year-old, even though their bones are a little bit more mature. It's still just as much strain on their soft tissues, more so because they're throwing at higher velocity. I mean, this is all about velocity. All this stuff didn't happen before this quest for velocity that we've seen the last 10 to 15 years really kind of came about. So I think that we maybe need to change the regimen a little bit of how quickly we bring pitchers along. Now, there's a couple of things that go along with that. I don't think the pitch clock's involved here. I agree with Major League Baseball that this is independent of the pitch clock. They only took a couple of seconds off of it. Resting for a few more seconds before you throw doesn't allow it to heal from the 98-mile-an-hour heater that you just threw on the last pitch. So that's number one. I think that it's really all about how we use pitchers. I think we probably realistically need to expand rosters to allow for more pitchers. I think we need to count their pitches more closely and keep a closer eye on it. I think the World Baseball Classic in March is the worst thing that's happened to pitchers since its inception. They're not ready to do that kind of play in March. They're just halfway through spring training. They're just coming along. So October sounds like a real good month for the World Baseball Classic. And maybe your pitchers who are in the World Series can't participate. That's not that big a deal. That always happened in the NFL, where in the NFL Pro Bowl, the players that were in the Super Bowl didn't get to play in the Pro Bowl. So this is a similar kind of analogy. I think that they really need to seriously consider moving the World Baseball Classic to the fall. The Olympics, that's July, August, when guys are really kind of in prime shape and they could probably handle participating in the Olympics. But I think we really need to pay more attention to the amount of work we're calling on our pitchers to do in spring training and the early months of the season.
Dr. Byer, I feel like you touched on everything that I want to present about the situation, but it's clear that you have a side between, I feel like, the civil war between of what the MLB puts blame on and what the PA puts blame on, the pitch clock versus the increase in speed and velocity. I was listening to an interview while I was doing some research on this topic, and it was from Justin Verlander, who is one of the many star pitchers who started the season on the IL. Actually, side note, Doc, 166 pitchers or 166 players started the season on the IL this opening day. Do you want to take a guess how many were pitchers?
I'll bet you it was like close to three quarters.
132. That's 80%.
That's a pretty good
Even
guess,
higher.
wasn't it?
But even higher. I mean, I would
Yeah.
have thought, yeah, three quarters is a lot, but 80%? And Justin Verlander being one of those. And Verlander said, hey, this increase in speed and velocity and the spin rate on balls, yes, it's causing more pain to the pitchers, more damage on the elbows, but it's also in response to balls changing, more balls flying out of the park, more players capable of slamming home runs. Um, what's your reaction to seeing, hey, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Is it really this rise in home runs that is now causing the increase in pitching velocity?
I never really thought of that as a cause and effect, but it really makes a lot of sense because pitchers have to feel if I don't smoke this guy, there's a darn good chance he's going to ball park it on me, you know?
And,
So
and that's
there's
exactly what
more,
Verlander point made a
right?
point
There's
for.
more pressure on them to just blow smoke past the guy so he can't hit a home run. You know, in the old days when guys were bunting or hitting little scratch singles to the opposite field or stuff like that, it's okay, this isn't going to do that much damage when so many of your hitters with their new launch angles and everything else that they're doing are able to just instantly change the position of the game, the pressure is on the pitcher to get the ball past the batter without him touching it. So the answer to that is velocity or just something really, really dirty, you know, a really dirty knuckleball or curveball, which, by the way, puts plenty of stress on the elbow too, I might add. So I think that it is probably related to the way the game has changed from being a scratch and run game, and which, by the way, I enjoyed more as an old school purist than I do, you know, with the emphasis today on the home run ball. And I think that baseball has to react, and the obvious reaction is going to be maybe lengthen spring training, start spring training a little bit earlier. You know, you're doing it all in Florida and Arizona, so it's not as if weather is the factor. I actually think some of the teams, I'd be interested to look at the data, and now I'm going to do this after we finish this interview today, as to whether pitchers in cold weather climates, where it's April is still pretty darn cold, you're still seeing snow even sometimes in some cities that have Major League Baseball teams, if their pitchers have a higher incidence of this happening early in the season than pitchers in sunny climates. That's an interesting thing. Let's both you and I agree to get back together and do the research on that and see what the story is. But I think
That would be fascinating.
maybe it should be late winter training instead of spring training where they start a little earlier. And I think that we need to make some roster adjustments. I think there's too much pressure on the major league rosters in terms of the number of players that they can have. And I think maybe more of them need to be pitchers.
Yeah, I think we're looking at places like Detroit. I remember Detroit playing in the snow in April one season. I remember Miguel Cabrera having his face covered with a ski mask while he was playing one day. Doc, you mentioned the old days of baseball, and honestly, I'm glad I got to live some of those days where complete games were such a stat. And ironically, I was looking up some stats and Sandy Alcantara has the most complete games in the last 3 years, and ironically, take a guess where Sandy Alcantara is right now.
Oh, I bet you I can count it on one hand.
He's recovering from Tommy John.
Yeah.
So
Oh, well, he's recovering from that. But I'm saying the number of complete games that we see now,
yes,
that's why I was so incensed with, you know, the Astros letting him go all the way and pitch that no-hitter. I mean, I would have yanked him in the sixth or seventh inning and let it be a team no-no instead of an individual pitcher no-no if you're going to do it. I just think it was bad pitcher management.
and I think that's why maybe some managers aren't as willing to pull out their pitchers because I think there are some pitchers who look at the CG in their stat and think that's still huge and maybe more important than the health of my UCL.
Well, you know, we've got a quality start being the new metric that we count. So let that take the place of CG. I mean, you know, the funny thing is, in the old days, when the Don Drysdales and the Sandy Koufaxes and guys like that were pitching, the Bob Fellers, let's go really far back, right? You know, it took more of a pitcher's brain to pitch a complete game than continuing to have velocity in the seventh or eighth inning. By the third or fourth time around that a batter was seeing you, he kind of knew your stuff. So it took your brain to figure out a way to get that batter out, not just your arm. And I think that we don't have pitchers who are trained that way anymore. It's a function of starts in little league. It starts in youth leagues. We need to maybe kind of take a step back and maybe say that the good old days should be the good new days.
So that's very sad and honestly kind of sobering. Even Verlander was trying to come up with some sort of new MLB rule. And honestly, we got to give credit to Rob Manfred. things like ideas, new rule changes like the pitch clock have helped the game speed up and have honestly made it more exciting. Oh, about the extra inning rules. Like Rob Manfred is doing a great job when it comes to that. But Verlander was pitching a great idea of how about incentivizing pitchers to go 3 rounds through the lineup, and how does that change maybe the designated hitter rule? Because yeah, like you said, we no longer see the long starts. When you mentioned quality starts, this goes back to the old adage of quality versus quantity. But I also saw another number that now pitchers are making an average, or pitching an average, starting pitchers are having an average of 5.1 innings pitch per start, which is shocking. I mean,
Yeah, I agree.
like you said, gone are the days of even making it to the seventh inning stretch.
And if you're gonna, I like Verlander's idea about 3 times through the lineup, because if you're gonna do that and pitch the whole game, you pitched a perfect game.
I know at this point, that's it.
No, I think there needs to be major roster changes. I think there need to be pitch counts need to be enforced. Days rest need to be enforced. Let's talk about our good buddy Shohei Ohtani. This guy's batting in the high 300s, right? I'm not sure we're going to see Shohei Ohtani pitch again. Not we
Big
we
story
don't
that
know if
came
he'll
out
be
this week.
we
Yeah.
we don't know if he'll be able to pitch again. We've had this discussion already after a second Tommy John procedure, but let's say he is. Does the team get hurt more by losing his bat? Because he's not going to be able to play every day and bat. If he just pitched yesterday, he's not going to bat the next day. I think that that's something that's going to change things too. We may have seen the last of Shohei Ohtani pitching if he continues to bat at this kind of rate.
Can you imagine us saying that he is too good to be Babe Ruth?
Huh. Well, it's $700 million is a lot to pay for a bat too. Just saying.
He gives us 700 million reasons to favor that way. I want to make one. I want to dive into one more point. You mentioned the 2028 Olympics here in LA. We want to see the best of the best athletes take the mound to battle for a gold medal, and just the thought of us being robbed because of Tommy John injuries, for pitchers to sit out an Olympics here in LA is terrifying.
Well, we see this in every sport now, not just baseball. The Olympics coming at the end of July. I think that of all the times of the year to have it, that's kind of the best time in terms of the safety profile of it. Okay. But, we see college players skipping bowl games because they're worried about, their combine days and trying out for the NFL draft. So all-star games, how many players sit out the home run derby because there's such this record of guys who go deep in the home run derby, not having a great second half of the season. So we've seen this all before. I think the Olympics being in July is a reasonable time for it to occur, unless you want to go back to amateur days and say it's just college players and not pros. And there's a lot of people who still say that the real purists still say that the Olympics were better when it was just amateur athletes. And we reacted to what the rest of the world was doing in that case. We didn't institute that. Our hockey team was always amateurs, and the Russian team that they faced was a bunch of paid professionals. So I think that maybe we should think about the idea of going back to amateur level for the Olympics. You
Ah,
got, you
come
got the
on,
World
Doc. We
Baseball
love dream
Classic.
teams.
You've got the World Baseball Classic for pros, and you do it in October, like I said, after the World Series or during the World Series. You only lose 2 teams that way. And maybe the Olympics, if it's going to occur right smack dab in the middle of your season, should not be for professionals. That's certainly something that's worth talking about. You're going to see some athletes opt out of the Olympics because of it. There's no doubt about that. So you're not going to see the dream team. And you've seen players opt out of basketball for fear of injury, and the NBA season was starting soon after the Olympics. So this is just always, here we go again. It all comes down to money, right? That's the bottom line. The root of all evil is always the money, and follow the money, and you're going to come up with the answer.
Come on, Doc. I thought all players wanted to play for a gold medal.
Yeah, okay. You keep pushing that narrative, you're going to be looking for another job, caller.
All right, Doc. Let's make it clear. In conclusion, with your expertise, what would you love? And you kind of talked about this, you mentioned this earlier, but what would you love to see MLB do to combat this epidemic in arm injuries?
Well, first of all, maybe start spring training a little earlier than you already do for pitchers. Okay. They already do report a little bit earlier than the rest of the team. Maybe you make that earlier still. I think the World Baseball Classic in March is just a no-go. Unless you're going to go like Little League goes and have the machine pitch the ball, right? I think that you need to change the roster makeup. You need to expand the roster to allow for more pitchers to be on the roster. And I think that looking at the idea of a pitch count and number of days rest count, just like they do in adolescence and youth, might be something that we have to think about doing.
And Doc, come on, the world is already being taken over by AI. We don't need robots to take over baseball
Well,
too.
if AI can learn to pitch, then that's going to solve the problem.
We need robot umps. I still believe in that though.
Oh, let's not start that. That's a whole nother segment, Carlo. Okay. Um, but
The road to robot umps.
plenty of people calling for that these days. We have the technology to call balls and strikes electronically, but I don't know, it's part of the game, I guess. But pitchers pitching complete games used to be part of the game too. Bunting used to be part of the game too. These things have all gone away.
Hey, Shohei showed that he can bunt in the first inning, and he's not too big of a start to do that.
Yep, that's true.
Dr. B, thank you very much for joining us on this topic.
Thanks so much for having me. Listen to me on AM 830, 12 noon every Saturday.